Naoya Inoue stands at just 5'5". In a sport where size is often treated as destiny, where bigger fighters are supposed to beat smaller ones simply because of the numbers on paper, Inoue has spent his entire career being underestimated because of his height. December 13, 2022. Ariake Arena, Tokyo. Inoue was set to face Paul Butler, a two-time world champion from England, in a fight billed as undisputed. Butler carried a significant size and reach advantage into the matchup, and in the lead-up to the fight, he made it clear he did not see Inoue as the untouchable force everyone else believed him to be.
It's all good. Obviously, the travel over was not as planned, but we got here in the end.
That's the main thing. As long as you're there for...
Butler had beaten a former WBO interim title holder to get here, and he genuinely believed his game plan, discipline, and physical advantages gave him a real chance to shock the boxing world in Inoue's own backyard. He had traveled to Japan for the first time in his career, stepping directly into the lion's den to challenge a fighter who had never lost on home soil. To understand why Butler's confidence mattered and why so many opponents before him had made the same mistake, you have to go back 3 years earlier to a fight that nearly ended Inoue's aura of invincibility altogether. November 7, 2019, Saitama Super Arena, Japan. Inoue faced Nonito Donaire, a veteran Filipino boxer nicknamed the Filipino Flash, in the final of the World Boxing Super Series. Everyone expected this to be a coronation, another routine step in Inoue's march toward legendary status. Instead, Donaire gave Inoue the single hardest fight of his career. In the second round, Donaire landed a clean left hook that opened a deep cut over Inoue's right eye. Inoue would later reveal that the shot fractured his orbital bone and broke his nose, leaving him with double vision for the remainder of the fight. For the first time in his professional career, the monster was forced to survive adversity rather than simply impose his will. Despite fighting through a fractured bone and blurred vision, Inoue refused to fold. He repeatedly rocked Donaire with counter right hands, and in an unforgettable 11th round, he dropped Donaire with a body shot and nearly finished him, only for Donaire to storm back and hurt Inoue in the same round. By the final bell, Inoue had won a unanimous decision in what would be universally recognized as the 2019 Fight of the Year. That fight mattered enormously to the story that would follow. It proved that Inoue was human, that he could be hurt, that he could be tested. And in the years that followed, every opponent who studied that tape walked away with the same conclusion. If Donaire, a smaller and more experienced boxer, could not fully exploit Inoue's disadvantages, what chance did a bigger, less battle-tested fighter really have? Paul Butler did not seem to draw that lesson. Standing taller, with a longer reach, and carrying the record of a genuine two-time world champion, Butler believed his physical dimensions alone gave him an edge that Donaire never had. The boxing world watched with genuine curiosity heading into the Tokyo fight. Butler was taller, his reach was longer, and his experience at the world title level was real. Would this finally be the fight where size actually mattered? From the opening bell, Inoue answered every doubt with his fists rather than his words. He pressed forward from the very first round, but Butler, coached by trainer Joe Gallagher and former world champion Scott Quigg, chose a defensive, disciplined approach designed to survive rather than engage. He kept his guard high, circled away from danger, and absorbed what he could while refusing to trade with Inoue in the open. Round after round, the pattern repeated itself. Butler's height and reach, the very advantages that were supposed to keep Inoue at bay, simply never translated into meaningful offense. Inoue's hand speed made every attempted counter arrive a fraction of a second too late. His precision found gaps in Butler's high guard that a fighter giving up so much size should never have been able to find. Reports from ringside noted that Inoue grew visibly frustrated with Butler's refusal to engage, hunting him down methodically rather than landing the single, spectacular knockout blow that had defined so many of his previous fights. By the middle rounds, Butler was surviving, not competing. Every exchange ended the same way, with Inoue's shorter arms somehow finding the target before Butler's longer reach could do anything meaningful in return. Butler's corner continued feeding him instructions, trying to find any adjustment that could change the pattern of the fight. but the gap in class was becoming impossible to disguise. In the 11th round, Inoue finally closed the show. A perfectly placed body shot dropped Butler, and moments later a finishing combination upstairs left no room for argument, no room for the excuses prepared in advance, and no room for anyone to suggest that height had ever been the deciding factor. The referee waved it off. Paul Butler, the taller, longer-reached opponent who had spent weeks explaining that Inoue was just a man with 2 arms and 2 legs like anyone else, was left on the canvas, beaten decisively by a fighter who stood several inches shorter than him. Inoue became the first undisputed bantamweight champion of the 4-belt era, and the first fighter to unify all 4 major world titles at bantamweight in half a century. Butler was far from the first fighter to walk into that mistake, and he would not be the last. In the years between his war with Donaire and the Butler fight, Inoue had already worked his way through a string of opponents who each carried their own physical advantages on paper. Jason Malone, an Australian fighter with a solid frame and a granite chin, was stopped inside 7 rounds. Michael Dasmariñas, a taller, rangier boxer from the Philippines, was finished in similarly dominant fashion. Aaron Dipayan, a Thai fighter known for his toughness, could not solve the same problem that every opponent before him had failed to solve. Each of them, in their own way, believed that whatever physical edge they carried into the ring would be enough to slow Inoue down. None of them found an answer. That pattern is part of what made the Butler fight so significant. It wasn't an isolated case of a bigger man failing to use his size. It was simply the latest chapter in a story that had been repeating itself for years, each time with a different opponent and a different set of physical advantages, and each time ending the exact same way. What separates Inoue from so many other champions is that his approach never changes regardless of who is standing across the ring. He does not adjust his game plan to play it safe. He does not rely on distance or patience to offset a size disadvantage the way smaller fighters in other divisions often do. Instead, he treats every opponent, regardless of height, reach, or reputation, the exact same way. Close the distance, take away the room to breathe, and break them down with speed and precision, until the size difference on paper becomes meaningless the moment the opening bell rings. Trainers and analysts who have studied his fights closely point to his footwork and his ability to control range as the real explanation behind his consistent success against bigger men. Where most smaller fighters try to survive on the outside, using movement to avoid getting hit, Inoue does the opposite. He hunts. He forces the taller fighter to fight at a distance they are not comfortable with, inside their own reach, where their supposed advantage becomes a liability instead of a weapon. This is the greatest moment of my career, Inoue said afterward, standing in the ring he had once again defended, without needing his height or reach to do it. For Butler, the loss meant returning home empty-handed after traveling further than any previous Inoue opponent to test him on his own turf. For Inoue, it meant another line added to a growing legacy built on proving that physical dimensions on paper mean nothing once the bell rings. Inoue had done what he always does. He had taken every physical advantage his opponent supposedly held and made it disappear the moment the fight began. He became the first undisputed bantamweight champion of boxing's 4-belt era that night, a title earned not by matching Butler's size, but by making that size completely irrelevant. What makes Inoue's story so remarkable is not simply that he wins despite giving up height and reach, it's that those advantages have become almost entirely meaningless against him. He does not fight cautiously to compensate for being smaller. He walks directly at fighters who tower over him, who believe their frame alone should be enough to keep him at bay, and he breaks them down with a combination of speed and power that no amount of height can defend against. The nickname Monster was not given to Inoue by accident. It reflects a fighter whose punching power seems entirely disconnected from his physical dimensions. A boxer capable of ending fights against bigger, longer, more experienced opponents with single shots that most fighters his size simply do not possess. Even in the one fight where his aura was genuinely tested, against Donaire, it wasn't Inoue's size that nearly undid him. It was a clean, veteran counterpunch against a fighter who refused to fold, no matter how much adversity he faced. Paul Butler walked into that ring believing Inoue was human, that he had 2 arms and 2 legs like any other opponent. He was right about that. Inoue is human. He can be cut, he can be hurt, he can be tested, as Donaire proved 3 years earlier. But being human was never going to be enough to beat him on a night when his preparation and precision were sharper than his opponent's height and reach. And that is why, in the world of boxing, there may be no more dangerous mistake a fighter can make than assuming Naoya Inoue is small enough to beat.